Ruby Community Conference done by Visuality, Ruby on Rails Experts Agency, presents Thomas Countz, From Legacy to Latest, how Zendesk upgraded Monolith to Rails 8.0 overnight.
Hi everyone again. So sorry for starting late. Still having a lot of technical difficulties, but we're here, we're live, and I'm so happy to be here to talk about my team. My name is Thomas Countz, as it says there with the little squiggle. You can find me anywhere online. I work at a company called Zendesk, which you might have heard of, and if not, I invite you to visit the booth if we're still hanging out there. I work on a team called the Ruby Platform Core team. It's a confusing name because it has nothing to do with the Ruby core team. This is specific to Zendesk, and I'm here with awesome members of my team, and I'm excited to share this talk with you from legacy to latest, how Zendesk upgraded Monolith to Rails 8.0 overnight. The truth is, it really wasn't overnight, and that could be the end of the talk because, well, I gave away the secret. But what I'm really excited to share is that this work was actually years in the making. No, we didn't necessarily target 8.0, but this concept of perpetually upgrading and making upgrades easier, not just for ourselves, but for everyone across the organization. We've been diligently working on this problem, and today I'm hoping to share a bit of that with you. There's three parts to this talk. First, I'm going to give a quick history of Zendesk's Ruby on Rails ecosystem, for those who might not be familiar. And I'll also talk about what the Ruby Platform Core team is and what we do. Next, I'll go over a few elements that make the perpetual upgrades possible. And in the third part, I'll talk a little bit about the challenges and the work that we're excited to do in the future. So to begin, I'd like to share some background and context. This is a quote from Eileen Uchitel. If you're running on Rails 3.2, your version is 10 years old, and so are your problems. This was a very influential quote from her, and that's why I've shared it here. So what do Ruby platform engineers or Ruby Rails ecosystem engineers do? It's kind of a confusing term. We don't have architecture in the sense of designing servers and distributed systems necessarily. And if we work on the language, is that the language architecture or is it the tooling around it? Well, whether or not you call yourself a Ruby platform engineer or if you call your team a Rails architecture team, if you do any of these few things, I would say you're counted among those teams. Upgrade Rails. Who here has upgraded Rails from any version to any version at any scale, any size? Great, all of us are part of this Rails ecosystem team. And of course, I'm joking just a little bit. We do a ton more than that. But primarily, it distills down to this. Our job is to ensure that Ruby and Rails continues to meet the needs of the companies we work for and the colleagues that we work with. And it may be, for me, when I was thinking about what this definition meant, I felt like it was a bit clinical. Like, isn't Ruby fun? Isn't the point of Rails to be really efficient and maximize developer happiness? And this feels a bit distant from that. But the truth of this statement is that Ruby and Rails needs to continually prove that it's the correct choice for the places that we work. And as much fun as we're having writing Ruby and being a part of the community, we can have that while also demanding that our organizations take the work that we do seriously. And I think this is a tall order, but there's some few things that we can do to make this a lot easier. We can upgrade Rails. Yeah, okay, it's not so funny anymore, but the truth is that everything that us engineers enjoy doing everything that our customers want from our applications and our services. And all of the investing and the budgeting and the planning that businesses need to do, all of that can grind to a halt if we don't keep our apps up to date and if we don't plan and manage the technical debt that comes along with it. So like I said, I'm part of this team called the Ruby Platform team over at Zendesk. The team was formed in 2020 with just 3 engineers, and now we're up to 6. We have our engineering manager, Andrew, and 5 engineers, Benjamin, Adita, Yuri, Nani, and myself. And like I said, we have a lot of focuses, and we do a lot of things across the organization. So I'll break it down now. We upgrade Rails. No, okay. I was hoping I'd get a little chuckle, but that's okay. That joke's old. But no, the team was formed actually because there was a lot of pain. What I was saying earlier about how everything can grind to a halt when we don't manage our technical debt, that was what the team was faced with when it was formed. And by forming the team, it signaled that Zendesk was willing to invest in managing this technical debt and invest in the people who were doing it, whether or not it was recognized. And that last part is kind of the crux of it. Rails needs to be upgraded. Our apps need to keep running. The difference is, does our organization recognize it or not? The difference is it a team doing it, or is it one engineer who can't sleep at night because the end-of-life date keeps coming closer and closer and closer? Does that sound familiar? Does anyone have that engineer on their team? Is anybody that engineer on the team? Yeah, I see here. We have an engineer like that on our team, and he's been on the team for a while. He's called Benjamin. No, it's other team members too, but particularly Benjamin, I think the company really wanted to invest in a team around Benjamin, and the point is so that the company could get more Benjamins. Sorry. but no, I'm pointing out Benjamin because, well, he does a lot of work both in the company and in open source, and he is one of the founding members of the team that was formed around him. So that's just a quick summary of what the Ruby Platform team, Platform Core team is at Zendesk, and a little bit about the ecosystem that we help support. There's 2 primary legacy large-scale monoliths, and for legal and security reasons, we'll just call them Monolith A and Monolith B. We're going to be focusing on Monolith B. That's the one that we upgraded overnight. But if you're interested in learning more about Monolith A, you can check out Christian Planis's talk, the story of a Rails monolith, I believe it's called. He's given that talk a few times already this year, and I believe he's here today if you want to chat with him. Alongside these 2 monoliths, this was back in 2022. We had about 100 services and about 1,800 gems that those services depended on. And these were direct and indirect gems. And I say here that it's our starting point because the first step in managing upgrades and managing this technical debt was doing the triage work, was taking a look at, okay, what apps do we have, what versions are running, and as weird as it might sound that we didn't know the answer, we did struggle to get that answer from the thousands of engineers across the globe, through many acquisitions, through apps that have been around for quite a long time. It was actually difficult to keep track of everything across the organization. And in 2022, I picked this date in particular because we quite expanded as a team, and so did our responsibilities. And suddenly, we were asked to look at the company as a whole, and I'm not sure that was an exercise that was done before. And just a little bit more about this Monolith B back in 2022. There's 480 contributors, 2 million lines of Ruby code. It started in 2012 back on Rails 2, and we had managed to get it to 6.1. And it was running about 2,000 to 5,000 requests per second. Of course, not a single Rails process. This says more maybe about the database than it does Rails, but still it was quite a big application. And in 22, right at the end, towards the end of the year, we managed to get to 6.1 after, I believe, 1,200 and some hours. So not the overnight that we were looking at now, but we did manage to get there, and this was a big feat. And I included this commit message from my teammate Nani here, because already, as soon as we got to 6.1, we were aiming for 7. And that became the ethos. That became this idea of perpetual upgrades. The worst thing about upgrading is having to do it over and over again. And if you never stop doing it, then you never have to deal with that pain. So that will bring us to this second part of the talk, where I'm just going to touch on 3 high-level ideas that I think contribute a lot to being able to do these perpetual upgrades and to constantly upgrade and keep not just the monolith that we looked at up to date, but all of the services that we now manage across Zendesk. Here's a quote here. This is the upgrade process. You bundle and boot the next version. You fix failures in CI. You deploy to staging, roll out to production, and repeat. And Benjamin, I don't know if he said that exactly, but I'm going to just quote him on that. So the 3 ideas that I'd like to talk about are keeping dev and test dependencies up to date with Dependabot groups, testing gems daily against all supported Rails versions and Rails main, and using dual booting not just for CI and tests, but also for production. So keeping dev and test dependencies up to date with Dependabot groups. The problem we were trying to solve here is that when it was time to upgrade, we had to bump a ton of gems. It still happens. We'll maybe get a ping from a team trying to upgrade Rails, and it's quite a large PR. And the solution here is to use a tool like Dependabot, which keeps your dependencies up to date. And if you keep reviewing and merging those PRs by the time you're ready to upgrade to the next release, hopefully you're not so far behind in the dependencies that it doesn't become too difficult. But there is a problem with Dependabot that I think many people find, and it's PR fatigue. And this comes in 2 forms. You can configure Dependabot to only open so many PRs, but then, of course, as soon as you finally review and merge some, you're just given another backlog. And so that's why the solution to this is to use Dependabot groups. The idea here is, instead of getting 3 PRs in this case, to upgrade gems that you're only using in development and you're only using in staging, Dependabot can group that into a single PR. You can manage this in your Dependabot YAML with the groups key. And when you get a PR like this, suddenly it takes the work that maybe would have been avoided because there's just so many PRs, down to something that's a little bit more manageable. The other benefit here is that because it's only development gems, you're kind of admitting to yourself that, yes, of course we need to review this PR, but we have to weigh the cost, weigh the risk. Is it necessary to review each individual PR to the nth degree, or can you afford yourself some risk in order to not take on more technical debt? Can you remove the psychological burden of reviewing dozens of PRs? And this goes a long way in doing that. There's a little bit of a catch with this in that there's only 2 group types that you can target in Dependabot. At least that's how it is now, as it needs to work with more than just bundler. And there are some workarounds that I'm hoping we can share at some point. But the gist of the workaround is that the bundler, and certainly the bundler CLI, gives you the ability to kind of filter and work with specific groups. So as an example, we have production, we have development, maybe we have test, But we have some other groups in our gem file too that have collected over time that mean various things to different people, and it's nice that we can filter how we need, even if Dependabot doesn't allow it. And the reason why this kind of technique or this approach I thought would be great to share is that it's about reducing noise and increasing signal. And that's like some nebulous tech bro statement. But what it means is part of our responsibility as Ruby platform engineers, or whatever we want to call ourselves, is to have empathy for product development, people who maybe don't feel confident doing Rails upgrades, and it's easy to berate them and say, oh, you need to do this, and you should be on the latest version, and why won't you just merge this PR? But it is difficult to understand where the risk is and take on a responsibility if you don't fully understand what might happen or what might go wrong. And by grouping these PRs, we're signaling to different folks that we've made the decision that it makes sense. We can afford to take on whatever small risk might be involved, or maybe a less thorough review, or reviewed by less people, maybe whatever it is, we can afford to take on a little bit of that risk instead of taking on the technical debt. And the hope is that this signal is very clear to our fellow engineers. The next element of perpetual upgrades that I want to share is testing gems daily against all supported Rails versions, or sorry, all supported Rails versions in Rails main. So the problem here is that when it's time to upgrade, we first need to make sure that the gems we maintain are compatible. This statement is gems we maintain could be open source gems, of course, but it also means internal gems or private gems. And the solution here is to test with multiple gem files, including one that targets the main branch. And what that could look like is something like this. You have a gem files directory, and in your CI, in this case it's GitHub Actions, you can use this matrix and run tests against the different configurations of Rails and Ruby versions. And if you're curious, the Rails main gem file might look something like this. And we just pull in a common.rb across all of the different gem files. And this has a really great benefit besides just running lots of tests. What it meant for us is that we could remove the upper bound of the requirement of different dependencies in our gems. And what does that mean? That means here we see you're required to have active record above 7.1. Normally you would put a cap on that and say, well, below, let's say 8.0, since that's our latest version. That way, you're not going to run an older version of Rails, certainly, but also we're saying we have no way to know if this is going to work with future versions of Rails. So we're going to protect you and use the tool that is Bundler to prevent you from trying to use this gem on a new version that isn't validated. Well, that's exactly what testing against main and testing against these different versions does for us. Not only can we guarantee that the versions that are in the gem spec will work with the gem, at least that's what the tests say. Any future versions we're prepared for because we're testing against main. This was a particular issue for us because we have so many internal gems and also public gems, and when it came time to upgrade, we became the blocker in some instances, which is the exact opposite of what we want, although not the worst problem to have. And so we needed a way to get out of our own way and feel safe doing it. And this is a similar argument to earlier, that removing the upper bound may introduce some risk, but that risk is cheaper than the technical debt that we would otherwise take on. The other benefit here is by testing against main, and we're doing this across, I believe, 60 or so gems at the moment, we're turning our test suite into an asset. both for ourselves and also for the community. It's kind of our early warning signal, and the results have been quite interesting. When something gets merged into main and all of our tests run, it's interesting to see, do all of them break in the same way or are some of them different? And it's allowed us to catch bugs early. It's allowed us to make sure that we're prepared for newer versions when they're released. And that's a very exciting way, I feel, to interact with the broader open source community, because we don't have to go in and read the changelog every single day. We can let the test tell us what's important, what changes are important that are coming to Rails, and we can use that information to immediately find bugs and surface bugs and offer solutions where we have them. So like I said, the reason that I was excited or interested in sharing this particular practice is because your tests are an asset to the Rails community. And for exactly the reasons that I said, by running the test matrices that we have across so many gems, we are exponentially increasing the amount of code in Rails that we're touching. And that gives us so much surface area to investigate and to find bugs. The third element of perpetual upgrades that I'd like to share is dual booting for CI, staging, and production. So the problem is upgrading is a lot of work, and once we're finished, we don't ever want to do it again. Well, the solution is to never finish. And I don't mean don't merge that PR. Do that. But like Nani did so many years ago, immediately start working on the next release. And that's what we can do with dual booting, but primarily by running against Rails main in production. So dual booting, if you're not familiar, it's the practice of using, generally there's a gem from Shopify called boot, but of course you can hack this any way you'd like. But in your tests, you can target different versions of Rails, and this is in your application. We were looking at a gem earlier, but this is in your Rails application. And this then allows you to, like we did with the gems, it allows you to run your whole test suite and see what's coming down the pike. And this doesn't necessarily have to be for Rails main. This can be any version that you're targeting. For Rails main in particular, the issue there is, where do you get the code that's in Rails main? So I just included a few slides in here in case you're not familiar. We use Git, and we check out main, and you can get the SHA of the head of the main branch, and you can use that in your gem file and target a SHA just like this, just as you would any other version. And we vendor our gems, which is how this is made available to us. But of course, you can't pull this from Ruby gems. So either you have to pull from Git directly, or you can vendor gems and target it this way. And the question about testing against main and why I was excited to share this element of perpetual upgrades is that it does bring up this question of like, should I do this? And it doesn't just mean, should I test against main? It's kind of a more existential question, not about life, but about the work that we do. Should I do this, or should I do any of this kind of work? And that is the challenge. I am very grateful, in fact, for the decision many years ago to create this team at Zendesk. And so this goes out to you, VPs and directors, CTOs. This work is getting done whether you recognize it or not. And it goes such a long way to recognize this work, whether it's by creating a team or taking it seriously, making space for it, showing appreciation and recognition, because it often goes unlooked. It's like if you had a business where you, delivered, if you're a truck delivery business and you had a lot full of trucks, and you just never did maintenance on it, and then you're surprised when all of the trucks break down. And if that's the core of your business, and for many SaaS products and many different services nowadays, the core of your business is this code and is what's running. And if you don't invest or appreciate or acknowledge the maintenance burden required, then maybe you start to think that Rails wasn't a good choice. But of course, the surprise is it doesn't matter what code you're using. It doesn't matter what framework you're using. You have to invest in your product. It doesn't just maintain itself. And so the answer that I think Zendesk came to a few years ago, and the answer that we use to drive our work, is that the risk of all of this, running against main or spending time to do this instead of maybe some other work, that risk is cheaper in the long run. That investment pays off more than any technical debt that you might accrue. And to be fair, if your business is only supposed to last until tomorrow, it's probably fine. But if you want your company to sustain itself, I will take the words from Shopify that they say they want Ruby on Rails to be a 100-year framework. If you want to invest in your business in that way, then yeah, the risk is a lot cheaper than where you might find yourself. And that brings me to the last section, which is about the challenges and the future work, the interesting problems we're tackling. Because of the shape of Zendesk's architecture that I shared earlier with the two big monoliths and then all the little services, we kind of approach this work from three different sides. Our tactic was to use our large monolith as the proving ground and to allow those lessons learned to filter down through the other services and products. And we were speaking about risk earlier, and I think it was a bit of a risk with this approach. It's one of our largest apps. There's a lot of complexity. It's certainly easier to maybe upgrade a newer service that's, say, already on 7.2 to 8.0 rather than this monolith. But by approaching it this way, it meant that we were sure that the work would get done in the monolith, but also we were guaranteed to learn a ton that we could share. And these were, and still are, some of the questions that we have to ask about our ecosystem. I think, I'm not sure if it's still in here, I had to edit it down, but yeah, how many apps do we have at Zendesk? That's a question. Again, you'd think we would know the answer, but at a point we didn't, and in some ways we still ask ourselves that question. When is the end-of-life date of each version? What gems are we using? If you saw Sam's talk yesterday, that's another question. It's very easy to let it all come out in the wash, let it all not be the focus, and generally that's not where our focus is. But these questions do have answers, and those answers do have implications. And what we have found as a team, and what we're excited about, is by finding the answers to these questions, we've found some really interesting ideas, and we've been able to contribute more. We've been able to engage other teams more. And so the future work that we're most interested in is to continue this work, but also to now share the learning and the discoveries more broadly, contribute more to open source some of the tooling that we've developed and built and discovered, and to keep this idea that Rails upgrades don't have to be scary and they don't have to take many, many years to complete, but it does require a significant front-end investment. And our hope, at least at Zendesk, and where things are headed now, is that now that we've gotten to the point we are, it's a lot easier to keep this machine running than it was to start from zero before. Just as a last slide to share, this is where we are at Rails 8. So it's a bit of a confusing metric here, but it's one that we've discovered is quite useful. This is showing for each version how many days behind the release of that version did it take for us to upgrade. And the reason why there's not just one number is because this includes having to upgrade and then downgrade and then upgrade and then downgrade. And it also includes, of course, the minor and patch versions. And the trend here, why I like this graph, because it shows like the point that I want to make. I went and found the data I needed. Was it was taking longer and longer and longer and longer to get upgrades done. We were further and further and further behind. And I'm very proud to say that, well, we were formed in 2020, so you can ignore that, but it was around this version that things started to get better. And it's in no small part by the amazing folks that I work with every single day. That's it. That's the talk. Of course, if you have any questions, I'm here, and also the amazing team is here, and many folks from Zendesk. So please come say hi. Thanks, everyone.
Any questions?
Thank you for the presentation. It was very insightful. Question about grouping. I can probably check it up as well, but do you know, can you group in a way that, with Dependabot, that it would, for example, if there is a major version, it would leave it out as a single pull request, but if there are like minor version upgrades, it would bundle them into single one. Is it possible?
That is a good. That's a good question. That's a good. That's a good question. I don't know what I did, but I'm not sure. There is a lot of configuration in Dependabot, and in fact, I just discovered that Dependabot does this grouping thing quite recently because we had implemented our own version of it because we had the constraints that we had. But I was actually surprised by how many different configuration options that you have, and I do believe that there is configuration for looking at like the semantic version, major, minor, and patch. I'm sorry? There is one. Yes, and I'm not sure how it interacts with the grouping, but it's probably you can use both. So the answer was that yes, you can. The question was, are you able to group and to configure different behavior based on the version as well as the group? And the answer was yes, that you can do that in Dependabot. Thank you. Any other questions? Well, yeah, sorry, I didn't see you had the microphone.
Yeah, I wanted to ask, you mentioned you have many gems, which are either open sourced or private. Is it always your team which maintains them, or is the responsibility spread between the teams? I'm asking because, so I work at GitHub, we have a platform and Monolith team and architecture team, and they own some gems, but we also have gems which are owned by other teams, which are product teams. They needed them at some point, but they're not interested really in maintaining or updating them, and that's always a bit of a friction when we need to do this. So I was curious how you do that in your teams at Zendesk.
Yeah, can we talk after? Please. Yeah, that is such the question of ownership, and it's such a tricky thing. I will say we have access, we have admin access to all of the gems, and we've made sure to, not all of them yet, but to have a common release workflow to hopefully make that easy. But that is a big challenge. I don't have a great answer, and when we put our workflow in to test against main in gems that we aren't technically the owners of, and when those tests fail, and they don't block merging PRs, but when those tests fails, we'll be responsible. But I think generally we have found it easier to ask for forgiveness, do the thing that needs to be done, and then ask for forgiveness. But it's a really both the gems themselves and also bumping the gems in different applications we have found, well, we have not found great owners for. But let's talk. Anyone else? There was, yeah, Beck.
Yeah, so my question is also about GEMS, because of course you also have third-party dependencies. And you can like remove Rails version caps from your own GEMS, but you can't do that from third parties. And do you like nudge the maintainers of open source gems, or do you fork it? Do you open pull requests? How do you deal with that?
Yeah.
I can give this back to you.
Yeah, so the question is, yeah, for the gems you own or maintain, you can do whatever you want with the requirements. But for public gems, and then, yeah, do you fork? Do you open pull requests? Do you nudge the maintainers? Yes to all of the above. And I think I was talking with my colleague Benjamin recently about this idea that because the work that we do and we run all of these tests, we become frequent flyers sometimes with some of the maintainers, and it makes it a little bit easier to say, yeah, we're running the latest version, we're running main, and we're having this issue. And I think maintainers generally are interested in that on its own, and also many members of the team are very involved in the community. And I think there's pros and cons to that. Of course, everyone wants to be able to nudge a maintainer to do the thing that you need to do. But of course, that it's not possible. But we've found success mostly in opening PRs or issues that are well described, offer help with solution, offer our test results, and or trying to nudge the maintainer and explain if it's something that we think, yeah, this is coming in the next release of Rails and it should be addressed. But similarly to the gem ownership question, we try to do as much as possible. So not just come with, this is broken, fix it, but this is broken, we think this is how it might be fixed. And we've tried forking in the past, and for some big experiments, we definitely would still do that, but generally we try to engage now with the open source community as much as possible. Any other questions?
Thank you. So my question is about the TDD culture at Zendesk. So I'm wondering, did that testing on Rails main and the next releases emerge organically from the bottom to up, or was it a top-level management decision and it was like forced on the on you?
Specifically testing against main, was that a decision that from management? No, that would have been great. Sure. Yes, on it. No, I'm joking, but of course, like I said earlier, we've had such great buy-in from management, which is a weird thing for me to say because I'm very like kumbaya and very much developer happiness. So to talk about management is a bit strange. But yeah, I think we kind of arrived at the fact, and you mentioned you work at GitHub, sorry, that's why I was looking at you. A lot of blog posts from GitHub, even quite recently, about dual booting, about testing against main, a lot of things from Eileen Uchitel about testing against main, and of course from Shopify. And I think it's kind of a solution that the community has arrived at, that this is such a it's such an asset to work at these companies with such big legacy code bases when it comes to maintaining gems and certainly Rails. And no, we can't give you our test suite, of course, but we can use that to test new features. And I think that is getting to main for us meant that upgrades were just going to be easier. I mean, the upgrade here that was overnight, the joke was it wasn't actually overnight. I don't know if you saw the timestamps. I just said that, and it was during a company holiday though. But really, without diminishing Benjamin's work, he was the one that did that upgrade. But it was bundle, open a PR, let CI turn green, start the deploy, and then there you go. And that happened because, well, before we were releasing Rails 8, I also didn't say this, we were on the 8.0 release candidate 2, I believe. So we were pretty certain that we knew what was going to happen, and the real Rails core team, they've been doing a lot of work to make upgrades easier, and certainly because we were on main, and then the release candidates, and then when it came time for the release, it was. And then your other question about testing, I think I don't have a great sense of that. We have unit tests, integration tests, smoke tests. We have teams responsible for creating broad tests. We have a lot of tests. What I will say is often the tests fail when they need to, at least we hope. And I think, again, it goes to that trade-off of, how certain do you need to be in order to take a risk? Well, we know how to roll back. So as long as we can roll back, let's push this out, let's observe, see what happens, and then we can handle it from there. But often the first step in all of this that people talk about is making sure you have a trustworthy test suite. Yeah. That was intimidating.
Okay, last one.
Last question.
So you were saying that Dependabot was creating a backlog of PRs for you. What was the main reason for the backlog? That the version bump was causing the CI to fail, or that you did not have enough trust in the CI?
I am so guilty of this. I feel so seen. It's ownership. It's just ownership. A lot of these the PRs, CI is passing. They're waiting for an approval. And when it comes to dev test gems, that's where we felt confident removing that. But for production gems, it's difficult to find which team added this gem and why, and how are we using it.
Yeah, and so now the real question. Have you actually measured the risk, or have you evaluated how often the green CI on a version bump was actually having a potential implication or regression?
That's a great question. This is why defining what this team does is so difficult. There's a whole team that does kind of engineering productivity, they're called at Zendesk, where they use those numbers or productize those numbers. But as a team, generally, we're primarily responsible for the two really big monoliths. And when we're part of that deploy procedure, or we're going through that, we're responding to it quickly. So I think that's a really good question, because that's an example of we build up a lot of intuition and institutional knowledge on the team, and we are very much interested in automating that. And I think we don't have a numerical answer for that question, only a qualitative feeling about it, a vibe. We work on vibes.
Okay, you personally, have you seen cases when CI was green, but something was human reviewing it was findings that something will break?
Yeah, absolutely. We see it in Rails. We were experiencing some weird things in Ruby. Yes, we don't have a strong correlation, but yeah, definitely.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. I think that was the last question, so thank you all
Thank you so much.
for the questions. We are around. Come talk to us.
disconnect?
Thanks again.
Can you disconnect? Yeah.